I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today we're checking out the facelifted Kia Cerato in GT form. The Cerato has been updated for 2021 in a number of ways, but the first and key way sits right there on the nose. This is the first car that Kia has released in Australia to bear the new brand logo, and it actually does make more of an impact than you might think. Right from the nose forward, the car looks a little bit fresher. It's just had one of those nice little nips and tucks in its midlife update, where it just has been tidied up really pleasantly. I think the Cerato is already a fairly good looking car, but this update works well in my view, particularly on this runway red GT hatchback, which is quite a unique looking vehicle. Now the GT continues to sit at the top of the Cerato lineup, but it's a pretty good value way to get into a spirited little warm hatch. Pretty warm in the case of the Cerato GT, which has an Australian tuned sport suspension and a 150 kilowatt turbo motor. Now in today's video, we're going to jump inside, check out the cabin of the Cerato, we'll have a look at the practicality, and then we'll head out onto the road to see how the GT performs. And then I'll wrap it up and give you my verdict on the car. Before we get started, make sure to hit subscribe down below. Here in the cabin of the Cerato, you benefit from an interior design that's functional, well laid out. Everything that you need to use on the go is pretty much precisely where you'd expect to find it. That's the case of all Cerato grades, but the GT really steps up the perceived quality inside with the use of really nice soft materials in a whole bunch of places. And in fact, Kia have done a really good job at elevating, just that perceived expense, I think, of the GT by targeting a few key areas. That starts with the steering wheel, which is a really nice leather unit, but it's also perforated and has red stitching and nice looking paddle shifters on the GT. That feels like an item you'd get in a much more expensive car. Similarly, the seats, they look very similar to the items that you get in the Stinger. They're perforated, they're black, they've got red highlights on them, and they really do hug you. Plus, they have heating and cooling and a really good range of electric adjustment over here on the driver's seat. So all in all, it feels like a mini luxury sports car. Plus, 2-position memory for the driver's seat, so you're not always having to change your adjustments here and there, which is a really good convenience feature. Looking at the dashboard, the layout is good, even if there is a bit of a mix of textures on display. You have this fine-grained soft touch plastic up here, but then this less fine-grained hard plastic sitting directly beneath it, but I think you'd get used to that pretty quickly. And the silver highlighting in the GT is really quite attractive. We also have a new 10.25-inch touchscreen on display here that is super high resolution. It's the same screen that you get in a whole bunch of Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis products. It runs pretty decent software. Some of the menu items are a little more buried than they were on the previous generation of Kia's infotainment, but all in all, it's easy to use. It also has wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, no wireless, unfortunately, but you do get wireless on the base models. Now, navigation's included, DAB radio is also included, and you get a JBL stereo on the GT. Looking forward, we've got analog gauges, pretty small trip computer in between them. You can't get a full digital cluster on the Cerato, unfortunately, but you do get nice touches like a little shelf here with a wireless phone charger, which is very grippy, so it will continue to hold your phone. Extra storage ahead of the shifter, big cup holders, a decent bin there, and also space for 600ml water bottles in the doors. Plus, we're sitting beneath a decent sized sunroof as well. So up front, the Cerato GT is very pleasant. Let's check out the back seat. Here in the back seat of the Cerato, the Kia shows one of its clear competitive advantages over cars like the Volkswagen Golf or the Ford Focus, and that's the amount of space that you get in row 2. For myself, it's 6 foot. Headroom is very good. Legroom is excellent for the class, and toe room is also acceptable. You could actually get a 5th person in the middle easier than in some of this car's competitors because there's barely any hump in the floor, but it is still a bit of a perch. Keep it to 4 people and everybody will be happy in the back of the Cerato, particularly because you do get air vents, great in a hot country like Australia. You get another USB port back here for charging devices on the go. You get a flip down armrest with 2 cup holders and map pockets, not in both seats. only at the back of the passenger seat. My only other gripes would be that the seat isn't quite inclined enough to support your legs that well over a really long drive. And unlike the Hyundai i30, you don't get soft touch materials on the back doors, but I am clutching at straws there. It's a big back seat and it's very functional. Around the back, the Cerato hatchback continues to have this very unique shape to it where, you know, it's got this super raked roofline here, nice design in the taillights, and then the new Kia mark, which has this metal-esque finishing to it. Actually looks very nice. Now, it's a manual tailgate, as you'd expect in this segment, but it opens up to reveal one of the biggest boots in the class at 428 litres. Really wide aperture, load height's not too bad, have a sturdy cargo cover, and then underneath the boot floor, there's a space saver spare for the Cerato GT, which runs on fairly wide 18-inch wheels and tyres. We've also got 4 tie-down points here. It's a good boot space, it's flexible, and that door is nice and easy to close. So what's the refreshed Cerato like to drive? Well, that depends very much on whether you purchase a version with the 2-litre petrol engine or if you go for the GT with the 1.6 turbo. Because not only is it a more powerful engine in the GT, but also the chassis is fundamentally different to the lower end 2-litre cars. You get a full independent rear suspension, for example, and you get Kia's most focused small car suspension tune here in the GT. But no matter the grade you go for, you do get an Australian developed suspension and steering tune, and that makes a huge difference to making the Cerato feel at home on an Australian country road. But just like in the pre-facelift version, it's the GT that shines the brightest. So what's the package that we're dealing with here? Well, we have Kia's 1.6 litre turbocharged petrol 4-cylinder engine, direct injected, producing 150 kilowatts of power and 265 Newton meters of torque. And if those outputs sound familiar, it's because this car is in many ways paired to the i30 N-Line in development. Now, the two cars diverge completely when they hit the port here in Australia, because the i30 has its own suspension and steering tune, it's its own product, nothing to do with the Cerato in our market. And that is totally noticeable behind the wheel of the Cerato GT, which absolutely has a harder edge to its control surfaces than the i30 N-Line. The N-Line is pretty compliant, pretty comfy, not soft, but you know, certainly you wouldn't call it out and out hard-edged. The Cerato GT, on the other hand, is closer to a full-blown performance model in terms of the focus that's put into its suspension and steering. Now, the suspension has been softened to a degree for the facelift GT after feedback that it was a little bit too far in pre-facelift form, a little bit uncomfortable at times. That being said, there's absolutely no concessions to softness. It still is very tightly controlled, very tight rebound on the dampers, but hard edges are dealt with better in the facelift Cerato GT. And that's good. Additionally, the steering has this kind of meaty weight to it, which it's always had in the current generation Cerato GT. And you'll either like that or you'll hate it. Some people prefer a small car which has more of a dainty steering rack, quicker to turn in, and a lighter feel in the hands. On the other hand, the Cerato GT does turn in very well. In fact, with alacrity on the Pilot Sport 4 tyres fitted to cars as they roll out of the dealership. But the steering wheel itself is quite heavy. It feels like a more muscular, bigger car than it is in that sense. Now, I like the driving position. It's perhaps a touch high, but the seat is comfortable. The view out is really good. The hatchback's rear window aperture is totally acceptable. The gauges are attractive, though it should be said that the Cerato doesn't pick up things like the Sorrento's blind spot cameras just yet. When Kia's small cars get that feature, they'll feel really up-to-date safety-wise and totally complete. That being said, AEB standard, lane keep assist is standard. We have blind spot monitoring in the traditional sense. So safety kit on the car. Also, I should mention adaptive cruise. Safety kit is pretty good on the Cerato. Now, refinement is acceptable. There's definitely a bit of road noise. I'm on a very smooth bit of road right now, so it's fairly quiet, but on course chip, we know this car can get a little noisy, but so can most small cars, and most of those cars are not wearing Pilot Sport 4s, I can tell you that much. You'll remember from John Law's review of the Cerato GT, he mentioned the fake induction sound of the engine, and that is It's still there, but I think it has been reduced a little bit for the facelift car. Either way, I didn't find it particularly offensive while I was driving. Now, in terms of fuel consumption, the Cerato GT is fairly decent for a car of this level of performance. 9 litres per 100 Ks is what I've been managing on my drive in the car, which I think is okay for the pace, and yeah, you know, it feels about right for an engine of this variety and of this performance. So those are my first impressions of the updated 2021 Kia Cerato in GT hatchback form. Just as I said at the start, it really does all begin with the new logo, doesn't it? It's mature and confident, and that pretty much reflects exactly what Kia is all about now. This isn't just a bargain basement brand anymore. They're making some pretty sophisticated cars, of which the Cerato GT is one. Now, it's certainly not perfect, no car is, and if you're interested in this vehicle, you really should test drive rivals like the i30N line and the Focus ST line to make sure that you're buying the car that really suits you. But the Kia should be in your considerations. Keen to know your thoughts? Let me know down below. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.